Hello and welcome back to another episode of In the Game podcast. I'm your host, Brian Clinton. I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Joe Tillery, and we are having an emergency podcast of some sorts. After rankings week began today for college football 25, we have the toughest places to play in college football. But first, Joe, how are you doing today? I like the green backdrop. I like the cat back there on the wall. So that's good stuff.
Thank you, man. I'm doing well. The green's a little bit of a bad color to match with purple, so it's the rental house. Can't change the color much, but I'm doing what I can.
Heck yeah. No, I like it. Let's jump right in, man. So we have the top 25 teams here, places to play, and I'll go ahead and share this. Real quick for the viewers. We have some interesting rankings here. Where else do you start but number one with Kyle Field? Now, okay, here's the deal. I want to preface this by saying I have an immense amount of respect for the 12th man. Like, I do think that that's a tough place to go and play. We've seen Nick Saban teams go in there and struggle. We've seen some other teams in the SEC go in there and struggle. But EA claims that this is factored on historical stats such as home winning percentage, home game attendance, active home winning streaks, team prestige, and more. If I'm not mistaken, in 2022, Appalachian State went into College Station and beat Texas A&M in front of the 12th man. So, like, what are your thoughts there on number one? Like, let's just flat out, what's your thoughts on Texas A&M being at number one there?
Yeah, pretty awful. I'll be honest with you. I echo Brian's sentiment, and I have nothing but mostly respect for Texas A&M and their fans. But like, at some point, if it's challenging for the home team to play at their own home stadium, what are we doing? What are we talking about? It's just so challenging that the home team also struggles equally like the road teams. No, at some point when you look at college football stadiums, and this is a wide degree, teams go through changes, teams go through all this different stuff. There's different opponents, different conference schedules. Your own head coach was fired due to underperforming over the last, 5 years, whatever the case is. Over the last couple of years, you got Jimbo Fisher fired. Clearly the team hasn't performed well enough at home or on the road to keep people from losing their jobs. How are we willingly saying this is the number one hardest place to play of any team in the country? Like, if I asked you, Brian, if you had to look through this list, there's like a ton of teams in the top 10 that I would much rather say, you know what, I'm going to Kyle Field. I don't want to go play in Tiger Stadium. I don't want to go play at Alabama. Like, I don't want to do a lot of that stuff, but they'd be a little bit lower on my list, to say the least.
So I know that there are more metrics than this being weighed here, but it is the top thing here. Home winning percentage is the first thing that they bring up. So that kind of intrigued me a little bit. I decided to go back the last 3 years. At home, including non-conference and conference games, Texas A&M is 16-5 at home. That equates to 76%. Now, that doesn't sound too bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alabama is 20-1 at home. That's 95.2%. LSU is 18-3. You go down the list here, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State, OU, those schools are all over 85% or higher. So just a thought. I did think it was interesting. Now, I think Bryant-Denny Stadium is better known as the house of Nick Saban as of recently. So I don't know how much stock I put into that. I do know it's loud there. Obviously, Alabama's been good for quite some time. But in talking with some SEC folks, that crowd has kind of become a wine and cheese crowd a bit. Just used to winning a lot. I think, even covering Oklahoma, I think there's some of that in Norman as well. You just get so used to winning and the expectation is just there. It's just not nearly as raucous as it should be. So I was surprised with Alabama at 2, but I think my biggest issue with this, there's no way Tiger Stadium isn't number 1 on this list. It's like that has been this predates the Les Miles era This goes back to when Saban was in Baton Rouge. Whenever Saban was in Baton Rouge and leading teams down there. This is, guys, Tiger Stadium's it's Death Valley. Like, you don't want to go there for a night game. Just am I the only one that thinks this? I totally believe it should have been LSU at 1.
I think you're right. I mean, there's arguments to be said that there's other places that are incredibly challenging, but like across the board, LSU comes to my mind. I know these last couple years under Brian Kelly, they haven't been ridiculous as a whole, but the team has still been losing, 3 games this season, 4 games I think last year, unless I'm mistaken. I think they finished 8-4, or something around there. But I would much rather
And
go
Heisman winner last year.
Yeah, Heisman winner last year. Like, you look at that, and it's like LSU is LSU. You're not going to find like wine and cheese crowds, and that's it. A&M kind of screams that a little bit to me, not because they've had so much success, but they get a little bit almost winded of a certain thing, and it's like there's some teams on this list that you see. Like, I would much rather go play a couple of teams. There's a couple of teams that I would put ahead of like a place like Penn State, even though they're 6th. Like, I would rather go play Texas A&M than go to a Penn State whiteout game. Like, there's stuff like that, but LSU has numbers that dwarf stadiums. So unless you want to make the argument that you'll give Kansas Arrowhead Stadium because they're playing there and that's the toughest place to play, you're not going to, like, there's not a team that's going to have a tougher spot. You're going to give me LSU every day of the week, but I get the respect for Alabama, and I won't sit here and, like, if it was Bama 1, LSU 2, I wouldn't have as much of an issue. But yeah, A&M being over both Bama and LSU is really, really challenging to me.
All right, so just off the top, we've talked about Texas A&M here. Are there any teams on this list, on this top 10, that you think do not have no spot being in the top 10 here? Is there any teams that you just look at and you're like, why in the heck are they even there?
There's ones that catch your eyes, and I want to preface this by saying this is me admitting I'm not a ball knower here, folks. I haven't been to either of these stadiums, and I don't want to sit here and say this place is awful because, they just don't have the prestige. But I know they're tough to play. I would be interested to see how Wisconsin stacks up to a place like, I mean, this might not be a top 10 school for everybody, but Stillwater, Oklahoma is one of the hardest places to play. I mean, you can attest that as an OU guy. Like, having the fans basically be able to touch your shoulder after you screw over a play, you have a giant paddle on the side of the thing. Like, that at night, I'd never want to play in Stillwater ever. There's a conversation for teams like Ames, but the two that stick out to me are Wisconsin and Florida. I know the Swamp has been challenging, and I get their previous history. As of late, the Swamp hasn't been, ridiculous. So those are the two that would come to me, would be Florida and Wisconsin on this list. I think all the others you can make a case for. OU deserves to be up there. Florida State's similar. And then no one's going to disagree with Georgia, Ohio State, and the other big dogs. But those are the teams that I look at and just at least my mind looked at with a question mark, to say the least.
Yeah, Camp Randall is the first one that jumps out to me that I don't believe just deserves to be in the top 10. Now, that's not to take away from jump around and the stadium environment that you have there. I understand that it's great. And I haven't been there in person to see it. But on the flip side, it just doesn't make sense for a team that has a 61.9% winning percentage at home over the last 3 years to have that spot there at number 7. Like, are we really saying that Wisconsin puts up a better home field advantage than a team like Oklahoma or even Florida for that matter? I mean, Florida hasn't been. Here's the thing: Florida hasn't been great, and maybe that's why A&M's where they're at with the same sentiment. Florida hasn't been great, right? They've had a couple of down years here. Over the last 3 years, they are still 14-5 in the Swamp. So, like, I kind of understand that a little bit. Like, it makes sense. They still are defending their turf, and that's, well, technically it's grass in the Swamp, but you get what I'm saying. There's reasons for these teams to be among the top 10, but Wisconsin just doesn't do it for me there. I'll be completely honest. Yeah, Sanford, Ohio Stadium, Tiger Stadium, I don't have any problem with those. I mean, Georgia checks in at 5. They're 19-0 in the last 3 seasons at home. So
I'll tell you what, I'd hate to play in Eugene. Like, there's places where I'm like, I don't want to go to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
There's no reason. And with that, we're gonna go into like the next teams. Watson Stadium at 11, absolutely should be top 10. Absolutely should be top 10. Neyland Stadium at Tennessee. I will tell you, I don't know that there are a handful of places that can put on a home field environment the way that Tennessee can when they're all lubed up. Like that is a crazy fan base. It's a huge stadium. That's big time. And so I like those. Clemson being at 12, that's the Walmart great value, Death Valley. That's kind of a second tier thing. But as we kind of just roll down this list, Michigan at the big house. Michigan is 22-0 at home over the last 3 seasons. They land at 16 on this list. I thought that was a little bit interesting. What I'm noticing here, though, and this will be something that you have some thoughts on, I would very much expect. There's only one Big 12 team on this list. Utah checks in at 18, which I believe is still undervalued. I made a comment to somebody earlier today. It's insane that Oklahoma State isn't on this list. They're 19-2 over the last 3 seasons at home. They've been historically good under Mike Gundy, and it's more than the environment, right? Like there is a feel under each head coach. It feels a little bit different, right? Like whenever Mike Gundy has been in charge in Stillwater, it's been tough to go in there and play. So like there's no reason why a team like Oklahoma State shouldn't be on there. Ames night games are a different breed, and Haddon's got its own reason. Like you tell me, what are some teams maybe that are on this list that you were like, what? And then some teams that you just couldn't understand that they didn't make the cut.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be a little bit biased for Bill Snyder Family Stadium. If we want to talk about, it's tough because how much do you value each metric they're doing? So home winning percentage, that's a big chunk of it. Stadium capacity, Bill Snyder, the Family Stadium, is above capacity for every single game for the better part of any era of Bill Snyder. Well, not any era, I suppose, early on, but over this period, K-State has packed every single home game. They've had a successful time at home. Teams don't like playing in Manhattan, even though it's it's centralized. It's not too bad travel-wise, but as a field, not many teams perform better at home. Like if you look at the difference between home and away spreads, K-State last season averaged 40 points at home in Manhattan, and then it was 33 on the road or something. That's a whole touchdown difference. And there's chunks like that where it's 40 points is top, whatever. I don't have the stats pulled up on that, but it's top 15, top 20 in the country of points per game at home. That's a big chunk of that. But I understand Stillwater, there's so many teams on here I could suggest and be like, who would you rather play? Or where would you rather play? Excuse me. I'd rather play in Iowa City than I would in Stillwater. I'd rather play against Virginia Tech at Lane Stadium than I would in Stillwater. Utah does deserve to be higher on this list. And this is one that I want to bounce off you because I think this is where a bias is going to come in for me. Well, actually, let me pump the brakes on that one. I'll get real quick rapid fire. Mississippi State, what are we doing?
I get the cowbells. I get the cowbells portion of it.
Yeah,
that is tough, but
that's fair.
I mean,
but there's a lot of different environments that I'm this comes to mind. Boise State, it's a blue field. I'll give you that. But what are we doing?
It's blue turf.
It's blue turf. And that's cool. It's like playing basketball against Oregon where you have the trees on the court. That would hurt me a little bit as a player. But, there's so many teams in this list where I'm like, man, that is a really interesting selection to slight a lot of the other teams. And it's not Boise State isn't tough to play at or Mississippi State isn't tough to play at. There's not many teams that go into Ames and win, especially at night. Stillwater, similar thing. But the team that I want to ask you about is Texas because it's not easy to play in Austin, and I'm not going to make the case that it is. But if we want to talk about a wine and cheese crowd, not because of sustained success where they're constantly winning and constantly putting up championship banners, but, that fan base has developed a little bit of that, and I'm not trying to take a shot at Texas, but that's not really a place where I'd look at and be like, I'd much rather play at Texas than I would in Norman, or I'd much rather play at Texas than, Ames or Stillwater. There's places like that where I'm like, yeah, if you're going to beat Texas, it's because you have the better team. It doesn't necessarily impact much for the home field environment, at least in my hypothetical here, but what do you think about Texas there?
So the one thing that I am kind of noticing a trend of here, and maybe this is playing a factor, is teams that hold over 100,000. If you're in 6 figures, I think that you're kind of getting the benefit of the doubt here. I still, with Michigan being at 16 though, and that being the biggest stadium in college football, I don't know. Something's odd about that. With them being 22-0, and I get Jim Harbaugh's gone, but something tells me when Texas walks in there in week 2, it's going to be tough. Like that to me, that just seems like a team that's down. So for Texas to be there at 19, I kind of understand it. I mean, they were a play away from beating Alabama a couple of years ago. Did a pretty good job this year, kind of defending their home turf. So I can understand that one. I think the biggest omission for me, as much as I would like to say it's Oklahoma State, having been to a few stadiums at this point in my life, I think one of the best atmospheres, and it didn't last for the entire game because it got out of hand pretty quick, but when Nebraska went down and scored on Oklahoma when they played in Lincoln a couple of years ago, I think that might have been, and I cover things from the sidelines in Norman, so I've seen a couple of things, you know. I don't know that I've ever felt an electricity like I did whenever Nebraska took a 7-0 lead on OU. It was nuts. Like, and I'm up there taking this in as a fan. Nebraska has sold out, despite all of the mediocrity. They have sold out. It's like 40 years in a row now, right? Like, I may be even like calling it short. I don't think there has been a game that it hasn't been full up there in Lincoln at Memorial Stadium. So I don't know, like that just feels wrong to me to have a team like Michigan State or you know, Arkansas, Boise State, anybody here in this like 21 to 25 area and not have Nebraska. So that one really that one hurts. Like I just don't.
I'm blown away. I'm gonna piggyback off of that a little bit. Like, this is where I wish we saw how much of each percentage is calculated into it, because Nebraska sells out all the time. The winning percentage isn't great. I mean, there's things like that. Like it's probably pretty dang solid, and you know, whatever the case is. But I think they're ones that don't get the benefit of the doubt. Besides that being, hey, it's a big stadium. You're selling out consistently. You have success in the past, but obviously recently hasn't been much. But it's one of those where it's like, show me the splits of how much of each percentage. You know, is there's just a gray area where you're like, this team's good here, but you know, like, I don't know. There's some teams on this list that I put ahead of Nebraska. Like, I'd rather play on the road against Boise State than I would, you know, in Lincoln. Like, it's just kind of crazy to see that. I wish we had specific splits of how much each is valued, because that might tell me, okay, they're valuing 50% home winning percentage versus this, so they're valuing 25% of stadium capacity or overall seating. That's where I start to wonder what that is in that case.
So on top of that, so here's what toughest places to play is actually going to mean in college football 25. So we've kind of seen it with the deep dive there. If you guys haven't checked that out, you need to. I think we have a link to that deep dive down in the description. But the thing that you're going to see because of that is some audio and in-game modifiers, as you can read here on the screen. So your route trees are going to be blurred or squiggly, like they're going to be moving around. You're going to see incorrect play art in some situations. Your confidence and your composure are going to be affected, so quarterbacks may not be as sharp as they should be. Your screen's going to shake. Like, there's going to be things that cause, you know, there will be controller vibration. Like, all of that stuff will make it more difficult to be the road team. So it is going to make a difference in the gameplay. Now, I will say, and this is probably the part that I need to let everybody in on. I'm going to highlight this. Rankings are subject to change in future updates. That tells me that when Texas A&M loses to Samford, I don't even think they play Samford, but you get what I'm saying. Like, when somebody drops a game that they probably shouldn't at home, it's probably going to affect some of this. And I don't know that it's going to change week to week. Like, I feel like that probably would be a little bit crazy. Maybe it's like one of those things where you have a team of the week boost and they get to go up. I don't know how any of that's going to look. There are opportunities for EA to get this right in the future, so that's a good thing. Joe, before we wrap this up, we've got a couple of things coming at the end of the week, and we'll be able to dive into those in at the end of the week in our episode then. But top offenses and defenses are coming on Thursday. And then on Friday, we have the overall team power rankings. We get to take a look at what I presume would be the top 25 in this game. Which one of those days are you more excited about? And who do you think is going to be the top offense, the top defense, and the top overall team in the game?
Well, before I mention that, because I totally want to apologize because I forgot, Morgantown, also incredibly tough to play. Wanted to slide that one out there real quick before the West Virginia fans get after me. But I think I'm more excited to see the power ratings rather than, because I believe they're not going to give us the exact overalls of this team's a 93, but you'll see maybe a similar list to this where it's 1 through 25. I think I'm more excited to see the overall team ranking because then that can that trickles into the next conversation of the overall team compares to offense, defense, whatever the case is. But if I had to give you a thought, immediately my brain offensively goes to two different teams. And if I'm leaving someone out, I apologize. My brain goes to the Oregon Ducks. They got a ton of dudes in the portal. Dylan Gabriel now leading the team. And it goes to another former Big 12 quarterback, Will Howard at Ohio State. I think those are the two teams offensively that I look at. Like, Ohio State is ridiculous. That running back room is going to be crazy. They have possibly the best wide receiver in college football or close to that. I think that's definitely an example to be said. If I'm splitting hairs, I think the benefit of the doubt will go to Ohio State and Ryan Day as the best offense in the country. Defensively, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, the Georgia Bulldogs are always flying around, and they might honestly get that benefit of the doubt. But I think there's going to be really good teams out there. I would probably say Georgia as of right now, unless I'm completely omitting anyone, but I'd probably roll with the Georgia defense as of right now. Ohio State will have a good defense. They got a ton of safeties out there that'll be good. Alabama's always in that conversation, but I would probably say Ohio State offensively and then Georgia defensively. I'll hear your thoughts, and then I'll jump in with my top overall team.
So, this, as boring as this is, I think you may have nailed it.
Let's go.
I think Ohio State's going to be your top offensive team. Oregon's going to be up there. Don't get me wrong. I think it's really going to help with Dylan Gabriel there, as you said. Georgia might have something to say if the quarterback position is as good as they expect with Carson Beck being there. So I think he's being kind of talked about as a preseason favorite to be the All-American, first teamer All-American for the AP. So that's interesting. Georgia is probably the right answer, but I think Ohio State might have something to say about that. They're just loaded this year, man. Like, I would not be surprised if Ohio State was your top overall team and was somewhere in the 98 to 99 range. I think that team is just going to be incredible. So, and that's kind of where I'll jump over and I'll give you mine. I think Ohio State's your number one team. I think that's your number one overall team in this game. I think Georgia will be right there at 2, but if I had to guess, I would say Ohio State is the top ranked team.
I think that's correct. I mean, I feel like, it's tough to do the same answers, but I think it's going to be some combination of those two teams in Oregon. Those would be my top 3.
Yeah.
And I'd probably go Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Oregon 3, or even flip Georgia and Oregon. I'm not sure on that one yet. But as a K-State guy, I would love to see Will Howard thrive. I think the dude has all the intangibles. And similar to what happened in 2022 when he stepped in for Adrian Martinez, when there's pieces around Will, he can be an unbelievable quarterback. When you put the ball in his hands and force him to make all the plays, that's where it starts to get a little bit slower. Not slower, but like makes some of the reads a little bit a hair behind where you need, or tries to fit into a tight window that's not there. As a K-State guy, I would love to see Avery Johnson and Will Howard play in the college football playoff in a first-round matchup, or probably not a first-round matchup. It'd probably have to be semifinals, given the way Ohio State is. But that'd be pretty sweet to see. I think Ohio State's probably going to be in that 97-plus category when they come out.
Yeah, that's going to be the team that immediately gets kicked out of eligible to play with whenever you're playing against buddies online. No picking Ohio State, probably Georgia.
I'd
Oregon's
be mad if they pull out Oregon, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'd be real mad.
Oregon's going to be a lot of fun, man. It's going to be a fun one to play with. So I'm excited about this. I cannot wait. Tomorrow, obviously, we're going to get a Sights and Sounds deep dive. So we're going to get a little more look at some of the songs, some of the music, some of the crowd noise, things like that, and that should be fun as well. And then we'll catch back up at the end of the week and go over some of the offenses, defenses, and obviously the teams that are going to be the best overall in the games. Looking forward to that, Joe. Appreciate you once again for coming on. This is starting to become a good habit, so I'm excited about the future of this podcast and YouTube channel. Really appreciate you guys supporting us and coming back. If you're not already, help us out. Give us a subscribe if you feel we deserve it. 5-star rating on any of your iTunes or Spotify would obviously help out as well too. As we get closer to the launch of this game, we're gonna start trickling out some of the ideas that we have for the channel going forward. So stay tuned for that. And we appreciate you guys once again. Thanks for watching the In the Game podcast. I'm Brian Clinton for my host, Joe Tillery. We will catch you next time.